This, to me, feels like if we are not collectively working on something that can be paradigm shifting, we are not collectively working on the right thing.
Welcome back. Today we are here with Holke Brammer. He leads the Hypercerts Foundation. Hypercerts is a close partner to Ma Earth, and Holke is a repeat guest on the show and someone I'm very grateful to call a friend. Thanks for being with us, Holke.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
So we've had a couple conversations over the last 2 years about Hypercerts on the REGENERATIon will be funded. The project's continuing to evolve, continuing to grow. So we have some updates and some new thinking to share. Maybe before we get into that and to not start too technical, what is the core problems or motivations that have led you to this project?
Yeah. So from my perspective, one of the crucial things that we don't get right now in our societies is that we don't actually fund what we as societies really value. So we need to have this discussion around what is value. And then when we have that discussion, and we can also partly disagree on that, what we really believe, what is value. And when we can make that visible, what is valuable for us, then we need to redirect our financial flows towards these things that we actually value. And this is not what actually happens in our societies at the moment.
Okay, and how would you defend that statement of like that we're not funding what values? Like what would be examples or your evidence for that?
So the evidence, I think it's like everybody has an intuition about that. If we look at, this is mainly our shared work on how do we fund everything around nature and how we interact with the planet. But then you can also look at open source software, you can look at journalism, you can look at community events, all those things that we actually know brings us value is not what receive the funding and the resources. Everybody who's actually doing great work is struggling to find the real funding for that. And that's a nice thing about this discussion. Everybody knows it, everybody sees it. So this is not the point where I have to convince anyone that this is a problem that we have to figure out together. So, and then the question is, how do we actually figure it out? How do we make visible what is the impactful work? How do we then kind of try to understand how we connect it with the financial flows? And this is where then the Hypercerts Foundation comes in and says, actually, we have an opportunity here. We have new technologies, how we can coordinate to aggregate different opinions, different measurements, judgments about things that happen in the world. And then we have the opportunity to rethink our financial system right now because it is currently being rebuilt on a different technical stack. And how can we not only make everything more efficient and faster, but how can we actually change the incentives based on what we collectively decided, like this is actually valuable things that we want to reward, and we want that people are working on these things.
Excellent. And I can't wait to get into all of that. For someone who's watching this, especially who doesn't know Holke Brammer or anything about your background and work, maybe brief context of your journey into this space.
Cool. Yeah. Happy to give a little bit of a background. So, in general, where I'm actually coming from, I come from like family background of farmers from like rural Germany, but then found myself at some point studying political economy, did my PhD in political economy, and then went out of academia and ventured into things like, traditional consulting, but also philanthropic investing with social business, and saw how kind of the impact space tries to actually bring in like the purpose into also like the investment space. Then I worked at Project Together in Berlin, where we tried to kind of accelerate social innovation between civil society and also like top-down institutions like the German government. And all of those experiences kind of pointed me to what is actually the underlying financial infrastructure that needs to be adapted to really make a significant difference. So, because like if we are just working on like a more superficial level where we try to work inside of the system to help like one social innovation to actually scale a little bit bigger, we are actually not tackling the real problem. And this to me feels like if we are not collectively working on something that can be like paradigm shifting, we are not collectively working on the right thing. And this for me is like, I'm not saying like I'm sitting here changing paradigms. I'm sitting here wanting to contribute to us collectively doing this.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so that journey has led you to this work around Hypercerts Foundation, maybe a little bit more scaffolding around what is Hypercerts Foundation, the history of the project, and how you came into it.
Cool. So I started my journey in kind of the Web3 blockchain space as a research scientist for public goods funding at Protocol Labs, where the questions were also like, how do we fund open source software? How do we fund AI safety work? And how do we create new mechanisms for this? And that's the exciting piece about the space, that there was the excitement around new experiments. There were resources to do so, and an understanding that these systems can actually look radically different. And so when I joined Protocol Labs, there was already some work and thinking around impact certificates, mainly by Davidad. And he pushed this idea forward and created kind of this notion of a hypercert, a digital impact certificate that can track work such that when we recognize work that has been impactful or is impactful now, that we can reward those who actually contributed to that in the past. And if we consistently do that, then we create something that now is called retroactive funding, that the individuals setting out to an endeavor to do like some impactful work, they know they will be rewarded for this work if they are successful. Mm-hmm. And this really changes the starting point, where they don't necessarily need to apply for grants and go through this slow bureaucratic mechanism, how we fund public goods today, but they can take a more entrepreneurial way, because there is, similar to you have in the future a way to be rewarded from your kind of startup experience. You have that kind of future in front of you. So that's where we started. From this,
just to clarify, sorry to interrupt you, but like just to make that concrete. So right now in society, if I want to, go restore a wetland or have a research breakthrough in an area, or contribute to some sort of public common good, I may be motivated to, but I don't actually have confidence that I'll get retroactively rewarded for it.
Yes, exactly.
And so if there was some sort of existing financial mechanisms that were already retroactively rewarding impact, then maybe I could just say, oh, you know what? I think I could contribute to that area, and I know I'll be taken care of if I go do that. But to have that type of retroactive market, there have to be some preconditions. There has to be some infrastructure and actual markets that have to exist. And so, as I'm hearing you describe it, part of the original notion of Hypercerts was to create the enabling conditions for that to be true.
Yes, exactly. And the notion here is that the retroactive funding, is like the closest that we have today to this are price competitions. At the price competition, somebody announces, I will pay somebody who does great work in this very specific area. Mm-hmm. So this is considered retroactive funding. Mm-hmm. But this doesn't currently, this works in some specific domains where people actually make that commitment before. Right. But it doesn't yet work where we want to do this for restoration, right? Mm-hmm. it's not that we can scale it up easily to reward everybody who does kind of the day-to-day work. We currently use it to kind of push innovation in some areas.
Right.
But this mechanism would allow those who can show, yes, I have done something impactful in the past, to get rewarded for that. And if this is a continuous mechanism, then we not only push forward innovation, but we also push forward the proven ways to create impact. And that is something that I think is necessary, and it's also necessary to do that at scale, because it's not that we just need 5 big projects. We actually need to fund those who on the ground do the work day to day, and creating mechanisms for them is what this could potentially really do.
Right. So a world where retroactive funding was more normalized would be a world where it's not just a few prize competitions and a few big projects, winners, and a whole bunch of intermediating functions that are create a lot of carrying costs to maintain that infrastructure. Would be something that's more widely distributed, more fluid and ongoing, with disintermediation of cost and effort. So it's just this ongoing, we're all able to have our financial incentives aligned with contributing to public good.
Exactly.
Okay, so that was kind of part of the starting vision of Hypercerts. Please continue.
Yes. So, and I think over time we have done some experiments, some prototypes, and saw that we are really onto something. And then we tried to also rebuild some of the infrastructure underlying Hypercerts, such that really more and more projects can build on top of it. What we have seen is, I think, one thing, especially with EcoCertain by Gainforest, that yes, you can build on top of it. And like this idea that multiple different platforms can use this technology to not only build kind of new funding platforms in data silos, but use this protocol to reuse data and make it such that we have like real interoperability in a funding system. So we have shown that that's possible, but also that it isn't as easy as it was supposed to be. So this is why we are currently also looking into like what is really the best foundation, the technical foundation to push this work forward. That's kind of on the technical side. And then on the conceptual side, I think we also see that what we really need is a multitude of different funding mechanisms. So we did talk now about retroactive funding, but we still need grants. We still need kind of price competitions and other ways of evaluating the impact and how we create kind of decision-making mechanisms, if that's a jury or if that is more like crowd-based, so that the crowd, like the individuals all around say, this is actually how we want to distribute the funding. There's kind of a modular approach to this. There are different ways to do this. And what we believe is that the Hypercerts protocol at its base, where we want to enable funding networks with different funding mechanisms and different funding decision-making mechanisms, that is what we can enable, and that is kind of our contribution to this space and the contribution for kind of bringing this space closer together so that we can coordinate and collaborate in a more efficient way.
Yeah, wonderfully said. So, essentially you have a few years of work, experiments, development, and some flagship pilots that have happened in the nature-based space, notably EcoCertain.xyz, launched by our friends at Gainforest, and big shout out to David and Sharfie for how much they're doing in this field. And so, that kind of gave you some real life experience around what's the developer experience, how do we get this in production, how do we use it for funding projects, additional examples that it's not just about retrospective funding, but there's other funding mechanisms. But really the key thing to get across, I think, especially for those who are non-technical, is that this is a protocol. This is not an app. This is not something that you just download on your phone and now it's going to do all of these things for you. As Hypercerts, this is a technical layer that is meant to support a myriad of different apps and funding types and mechanisms for verifying impact and showing impact.
Yes. And the way we are thinking about it is that, for instance, EcoCertain.xyz that you mentioned and MyEarth as a platform, they are both two platforms where projects can crowdfund their financial resources to do the work that they are setting out to do. Then there are other platforms like Sylvie that enables projects to add reports and add evidence about the impact that they actually have created. And all those ideally use kind of the same data schemas and can reuse the data of the other projects. Because what's really important is that we take on the perspective of the projects themselves, right? As a project, there are all these like different tech tools and you're like overwhelmed with like, okay, I can use this platform or that platform. And they all kind of look cool and look great. But what you really want is that it's easy for you from the user experience to say, this is the work that we have done in the past. This is our plan, what we want to do in the future. And this is kind of the funding that we need. And we don't want to be bogged down into more like administrative things. We don't want to use 15 different apps to do all of this. And I don't want to put my data into like 15 different apps.
Right.
So, and I think this is like a common problem. And like we have talked about this probably in every sector for like decades. But I think that we do have the opportunity now to get this right in a different way because the tech advanced and also the field, I feel like it's really coming together. And like also now that we are at New York Climate Week, we had so many discussions with so many people who work on this, and we all see that we can and we want to walk in the same direction. And if the Hypercerts protocol can be an enabler for that, because we have a way to define common data schemas, but don't prevent anybody from using a different data schema. So there's like some kind of coordination that is helpful, but we don't force anyone to do exactly the same thing. So we don't go through a 2 or 3 year like standardization process, but we can just like go and see what really works. And like different platforms and organizations can actually do this experimentation, but we do that on kind of the same protocol such that we can move together faster. Together we figure out what works, and then the kind of coming together on different or like the same data schemas is then easy and simple. So then on the other hand, where like the one part is kind of the data in the background, and then the other part is kind of the user experience, where we enable different platforms to design it for their stakeholders and for their specific use case, if it is funding or if it is reporting. And so that is then can be designed in an extremely simple way where the users are just used to something like some very convenient way of interacting with apps these days. And this is what our ambition needs to be, that the user experience is excellent, is world-class. There's not like, oh, I get like a second-class app just because I do this like nonprofit impact work.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, there's so much there. I want to double-click on a lot of it, but maybe I'll also give a bit of context of why MyEarth continues to be so excited about what's happening here and our journey into this. So MyEarth at a high level sees land stewards and regenerators on the ground as the heroes of our story. They're the primary constituent that we aim to serve. And they tell us they need more funding. Over and over and over. They need a lot of things, but funding is one of the huge issues. So we define the problem set as supporting land stewards and getting more funding, but they don't want funding just with lots of strings attached or lots of top-down conditions. They want funding that has some degree of sovereignty and flexibility and respect for their governance roles in their communities around how those allocations of resources happen. And so we look at this and say, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense because there's a $1 trillion a year nature funding gap that's widening. And okay, Ma Earth, we want to respond to this challenge. And when we look at these nature markets, these carbon markets, the climate finance markets, the different forms of instruments that have been, developed, devised, experimented with, a lot of the common patterns we see is very top-down, very inefficient, lots of silos, lots of broken, cross-jurisdictional things, and lots of the issues that, as we all know, of late-stage capitalism, so to speak, that those are mirrored in kind of the challenges of bringing resources to the things that we all collectively value and rely on, our Mother Earth. So enter blockchains, enter decentralized protocols, enter AI. We essentially see the technical digital underpinnings of our world economy as we know it going through another wave of rewrite of, whether you want to call it disruption or evolution or innovation, but like the logics of the system are being rewritten before our eyes. And so this is an opportunity as builders, as entrepreneurs, as activists, as passionate enthusiasts for life, like how do we contribute to try to get it better and try to make a difference and bring more financial resources to the things we all value, right? And what I see and have continued, to be inspired by from Hypercerts is like a little Lego block. It's kind of small, actually, and it tries to inherit the benefits of decentralized protocols, of blockchains, of tokenization, of different ways to enable experimentation and evolution in funding markets. It's not prescriptive and saying we know all the answers. It tries to be really lean and really simple. And at the base layer, the other things I really like is, when I came into the conversation, there was already a community of resonance that was forming around it with a lot of the smartest people in the room, right? There was already a lot of good work that had happened from a research perspective. And the underpinnings of the foundation itself didn't have VC or investor incentive capture at the base layer. And it's a very lean, frugal organization. And so, you worry when you're building on protocols if someday the investor interests are going to try to do a lot of value capture and so forth. And what I saw in your leadership was really, just a very resonant, aligned clarity about keeping those incentives at the base layer really strong and solid in service to the community. So to me, this is a really cool Lego block to work on and work with and try to bring into some of these bold experiments for changing the way that nature funding markets work. And it's going to be messy and it's going to take time and it's going to take a lot of trial and error. But I guess that's, for people who are listening, that's why and how we've gotten into the work from Ma Earth.
Yeah, and to double click on this like relation between the protocol and the platforms on top of them. So we really want to develop the protocol as a pure public good, mainly because like if we wouldn't do that, I don't think there would be the adoption around it. So we ourselves would then be reliant on kind of grant funding and the platforms that build on top of the protocol that they like help maintain and improve the protocol. But we want to build it with the network that builds on top of it anyways. And this is a nice thing that now we are rebuilding some of the infrastructure, that we have already this community of builders of platforms that want to build on top of it, so that we can build it in the first step with the network. So, and this is, I think, important to get it right. And then the other aspect is that what we want to do is not only focus on the user experience, because in that way, our users are actually the platforms that then build the end user experience.
Right.
We want to also have an excellent developer experience. So this DX, not only UX. And if we get that right, then it should be easy for existing platforms, no matter what technology they use, if that's kind of called under the label of Web 2 or Web 3, which I don't like the labels in general for different platforms, but anyone should be able to easily integrate this such that we can create kind of the data that travels with the projects across platforms, and we don't have the kind of platform power that we see with some of the existing platforms, because that's something that like we don't want to expose the projects to, and no evaluator and no scientist who like provides data. So that's, I think, the important thing, the relation between the protocol and the platform. And maybe to give back a question to you, so what is like kind of the platform that Earth would build on top of Hypercerts? Like, if you can share a little bit more around that, what the plan is, because I think that also highlights kind of the relationship between kind of Hypercerts and our kind of, exactly as you say, small Lego block. And actually, like, the smaller it is, the better, because it needs to be extremely simple. And the relation with kind of the end user experience that Earth and others are building on top of it.
Yeah. Well, I think the framework that you brought to my nomenclature that I continue to think a lot about is that there's really three core actors. There's the land organizations and projects that I mentioned. There's the funders, and then there's the evaluators. And so we discussed, what are the land projects and organizations asking for? Asking for resources and sovereignty and kind of autonomy and how those resources are obtained for their local place. Don't make me just apply for a Vera standard carbon credit under this methodology, Let me do the ecological interventions that our community values and that are relevant for our particular place. Don't make me be $1 million farm just to get some money for tree planting. Like, how do we support bottoms up grassroots communities? Don't make me have a 501c3 US structure just to receive funds from the philanthropic space. How do we actually enable funds to flow on the ground into a variety of different types of organizational models? So these are some of their needs and requirements. And then you have the funders, right? And the funders need trust. They need transparency. They need feedback loops. They need evidence. They need compliance. They need an ability to move their capital in a variety of funding mechanisms. Some are philanthropic, some are large philanthropic, some are small philanthropic, some are individual donations, some are lending markets, some are equity markets. Some are, there's going to be a variety of different types of financial instruments that can move into the plurality of things when we talk about nature, right? And so that's the funders. But really importantly, what we learned from carbon markets 1, 2, and 3.0, and all the issues that we've seen there, is that the trust issues persist, right? So how do we create an environment where data and evidence and reporting and verification is done in a much more streamlined, much more timely, much more high integrity way? And this is something that decentralized protocols and blockchains are great for, that we can have shared ledger systems, that we can have actual chain of data moving from point A to point B, and that everyone can go in and see that this happened, and that there's actual shared language rather than all of it being on different silos of these different registries and these different, back office project developer, like, let's bring this into the light and actually have a shared place for it. And none of these are new ideas. It's just to, I guess, emphasize that I think these ideas are still really important. And then the evaluators, what do they need? Well, there's a variety of evaluators as well. It could be a geospatial, AI, satellite imagery company that can evaluate reforestation rates, looking at satellite maps and da-da-da-da. It could be a regenerative ag consultant that is on the farm, taking soil samples and working with the farmer and, actually giving them feedback about the water retention of their landscape. It could be a school that says, yes, this group of volunteers came and planted a row of trees next to the fence line, and now we have berries for the kids. It's like the different forms of impact claims, attestations, evaluations. People use different words, impact reporting. But you see a lot of this happen already in terms of projects are trying to show their impact and report on their impact on an annual basis in their glossy PDFs that then they send to the funders. And then all the different funders are trying to understand, can I trust the impact that's happening here? And I think at the one metaphor I often come back to is like, I will click a couple buttons on my phone and then stay in a stranger's house on the basis of some reviews on Airbnb. That's amazing. Like that I have that level of trust to go stay in a stranger's house. Like, don't even know the owner of the house and just type in a key code pad and or I will then, proceed to hit another button and go get in a stranger's car and go from point A to point B and trust them to drive me across Manhattan, right? Like that's amazing. And so we know that software and digital experiences can create trust and network effects where it didn't previously exist, right? That's a very important learning from the sharing economy Web 2.0 world, because in the space of land regeneration, restoration, regen ag, farming, carbon markets, that we don't really have these trust layers. We haven't really seen applications hit escape velocity and create those network effects. However, we also know that Airbnb and Uber are centralized, top-down, VC, venture-backed public companies with a strong incentive to continue to increase fees and reduce the amount that goes to their end stewards and drivers. And I'm not lobbying this as a whole critique of Airbnb and Uber. I'm just saying that we don't want to do it that way for nature markets. And there's too many different aspects when we're talking about nature and restoration to think that a good vision of the future is one end-all, be-all public company that's going to run this, right? So this is part of the reason that from a Ma Earth vantage point, it's really crucial. We have opinions and ideas of how we'd like to build a little app on Ma Earth, but our ambition and aspiration is that this is contributing to this collective commons and contributing to something where other different apps can exist and coexist in an interoperable way. So that's what drew us into blockchains, was like, okay, cool, we can have the data and the funding and the impact be interoperable in an open environment so that Gainforest's experience and how they're designing their app, and Restore's experience and how they're designing their system, and Regen Network over here, and BioFi over here, and Sylvie over here, and RefiDAO over here, and that we can all start to have shared patterns and language underneath the soil, and we're all basically just mushroom apps on top. And this is especially accelerating with AI because you can vibe code an app in a weekend, right? You can vibe code different views. And so maybe it's a Northeast Hudson Valley bioregional app that starts to organize what's happening in the Hudson Valley. And maybe there's some civic participation function around bioregional voting and, DAO governance. Or maybe it's an Amazon rainforest monitoring tracking app to prevent illegal mining and logging and things that are happening there. And so, or maybe it's what Sylvie's doing around a lot of the tree planting and reforestation activities and an app view on that. And so, protocols is nothing new. Shared data is nothing new, right? We just haven't really had it for this space. We haven't really had it explicitly oriented towards the impact world. And so that's why I think we are so committed to let's run these experiments with Hypercerts. Final thing on my rant, because you really asked me, like, what's the vision of the app? It's to run funding rounds for nature projects and to continue what we did in 2024, where we ran our first 2 pilot funding rounds using Gitcoin. And we basically brought 50 land stewards in round 2 together. We got over 1,000 donors. We distributed, $250,000 or something across matching pools and donations. And we're trying to get that flywheel network effect of those 3 constituents: the projects, the funders, and the evaluators.
Nice. I would love to double click on the trust issue that you pointed out, because I think this is the part that we need to get right. Because whatever funding mechanisms you have, we need to have the trust that the money reaches actually where it really is impactful, where it does what it's supposed to do. And the way I see that, and it's like you yourself and My Earth hold a lot of those relationships. It's like with evaluators, with people who have actually done this work already. Like we are not creating new evaluators out of nothing. It's
right.
Actually the project report on their work. We can do that now in a more trustworthy way. And others who give out certifications today, they do a lot of this work already. And we are not speaking yet the same language. And then a second point, I think what we need to move towards is the differentiation between slow feedback loops and really fast feedback loops. Because when I think about, I want to fund a land project, and I have basically 2 pieces of evidence. One comes from kind of the data analysis from satellite imagery. It's like we can scale that up with technology. It's like that forest that this project takes care of looks healthy, great. But then I know that it doesn't know everything. But if I then have another piece of evidence from the community that the community actually has in verification that this project actually is legit and does great work, then this is enough evidence if I would be a funder to fund that project. So, and this can be really fast. So, and then when we do that for a lot of projects, we probably want to add kind of a more slow feedback loop, more scientific. We want to engage academics and researchers to actually check on the fast feedback loop. And that really then builds trust in the overall system, because we will find out where our kind of really fast approach didn't actually work.
Right.
So then we can correct it and we can learn in the system. And that's why it's also important that we do this learning together. So that's kind of what we call it, an open evaluation system that we want to engage. And that's why the way evaluations are collected can be very fast, but it can also be in a very slow way. But all of that evidence should accrue to the same things so that we can actually see what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah. And I think that open evaluation system is especially crucial for supporting a world where smaller local community scale projects can build trust for funding flows, right? Like a lot of the farmers that we know in New Zealand don't even have the bandwidth and capacity to file for simple ways to get funding from things like emissions trading scheme in New Zealand, right? Like it's already too much if you have to go get consultants and lawyers and all these different types of things. And a lot of communities in, the Amazon notoriously don't receive funding from the carbon markets that the carbon markets are meant to help bring capital towards, right? A lot of indigenous communities famously don't see any of the money that is flowing through from the top from a lot of these global commitments, right? So okay, well, why is this happening? Well, it's happening partly because if you're a smallholder farm or if you're a small land steward, you just don't necessarily have the size and scale to be legible to the system or to prioritize the myriad of things to enable you to get access to those funds. Okay, well, why? Well, because the evaluations have such an onerous set of requirements, and they do exist for really well-intentioned purposes and reasons. Like governments need to know that if they're going to put billions of dollars or millions of dollars someplace, that it's going going to activities that are evidence-based, doing what they said, that there's not fraud and there's not systemic issues. Okay, but how do we create a more lightweight evaluation system as well, a more democratic evaluation system as well, where if a smallhold farm, we're just trying to give them $1,000, right? Like, well, that impact claim might be much simpler. It might not be an ecologist coming out, every quarter and evaluating because maybe that funding was actually just to go get a little glass house for, to build more food security or to build more security around how the seeds were being saved and planted each season, right? Like, so I think open evaluation system is a flagship feature of Hypercerts. And I think it, in the nature space, amongst other benefits, helps to address how do we get funds into smaller community scale projects.
Yeah, and this is actually a classic problem, because you have those projects that are just kind of in the missing middle for funding, because they are not small enough that, because with microfinance we just give out money with the hope that it does good, but it's so small that we just have to trust it. And then we have the big checks where they are so big that we can put in the effort to do the due diligence. And in the middle, and this is where we have a lot of projects that really need the funds, it is too costly to do a real due diligence, but it also is a significant amount of funding that we don't just want to give out without any evaluation. And I think this then also connects to with when we talk about the open evaluation system, it connects to the people on the ground actually know what's working and what's right. And so can we leverage and organize these regions in that way, the locals in a different way? And can we then also enable these types of organizations? And the bioregional movement is, I think, something that is picking up speed. And I think this is amazing because it enables also, in combination with Hypercerts and other funding platforms, that decisions can be made on a more local, regional level. We can ingest kind of the trust that comes in those regions, where potentially the peers, different farmers actually evaluate each other, and that builds trust for larger funders that they need to put more funds into that region. But the funders that are sitting somewhere else are not actually deciding where the money goes. They just trust the process in the region, that the region is able to effectively govern itself.
Right.
And that's, I think, such an unlock that we know what the funders need. They need the trust, but we can provide that on that different level from the bioregion or different systems that we can build.
Yep. So I want to bring it to, present day in terms of brass tacks, where we're at, what we're struggling with, what we're learning. But before we do that, I also want to just at a zoomed out level ask you how you see this body of work weaving with what's happening in AI.
Yes. So I think, to some extent, everybody who, not even everybody who works in tech, but everybody who has kind of some entrepreneurial activity or thinks about doing something in the world that is impactful needs to think about how does AI impact what I'm doing? And what we are seeing is that it is an enabler for a lot of interactions. It makes it easier to build. It makes it easier to interact with different apps. But crucially, what we see is that today already, every project uses some kind of AI in order to fill out grant applications and other types of communications things. On the other side, funders start using AIs in order to pre-select at least their grantees and where they want to put the funding. But 2 steps further, we will have just a project will have an AI agent who is just filling out the applications fully. Actually, it goes even into you just tell an AI to find funding opportunities and apply and like bring in funding. And on the other side, you will have AIs who basically have criteria how they should distribute the funding. So in the hopeful case for AI in kind of the impact funding space, everybody will have a fantastic narrative, but it will not matter anymore. So it is that you can write applications, but the AI on the other side just sees the same story from all the projects and is then thinking, okay, what is actually different from this project to this project? And the only thing that really will make a difference then, in the hopeful case, there probably are some other cases, but like in the hopeful case, it's verifiable data. Can you show me that you have done great work in the past? Can you show me that what you want to do is actually reasonable and you can execute on that and that it will have an impact? Or if it is really just retroactive funding, then can I see the evidence that you have? So those kind of applications need exactly what the Hypercerts protocol wants to enable. It is kind of shared data that can be verified from different evaluators, self-reports, etc., to build the trust in the data. And then the AI layer on top of that just makes those interactions much easier. And in that way, if it takes out kind of the advantage of like somebody who can write a great grant application, then it actually makes it more fair. So this is kind of my hopeful case for AI in the funding space, where we kind of like see that and build infrastructure that works together with those use cases.
Yeah. So the importance of verifiable data increases in an AI paradigm, and how many pretty pictures and colorful words that you use to describe your story, while important, commoditizes increasingly as everyone has a button that says, rewrite this with AI and make it look good, right? And so really it is all the more important that we're building protocols for collecting data, verifying data, building trust, and building trust in this bottoms-up way where there's an open evaluation system that's not just enshrining a couple methodology providers with the end-all, be-all judicial responsibility of determining what's important.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay. So 2025 Climate Week, we've been working on this. We've been deep in the lab. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited, and obviously there's been challenges as well. Like we've been, as expected, going through a lot of the different aspects of what does it take to bring this into people's hands. What's the current state?
So as I mentioned before, we are building a little bit parts of the infrastructure new, and we are doing this because like there has been a shift in like what's possible and how do we like further our mission exactly, and then also the experience with like the first projects building on top of the first version. And so what we are doing now, we are exploring how we can. I mean, I think we didn't mention that in the beginning. The current version of Hypercerts, it always anchors everything on chain. It's basically a Hypercert is a digital token that represents the work that somebody has done or will do.
Right. So that little Lego block is like who did what, when.
Yes.
And that's a token that lives on the blockchain.
Exactly. And to simplify this, we can actually detach this and like decouple it so that we have kind of the data layer, who did what, when, and where, including kind of then the additional evaluations from the, okay, we put this into kind of the funding mechanism, we tokenize it, we have kind of this on-chain representation of the impact. And that actually unlocks a lot of like opportunities for builders on top of it.
Yeah.
Because it unlocks, first of all, like non-tokenized hypercerts. So if you just want to record your work and you want to receive evaluations of your work, you don't actually need to tokenize it yet. So that is what that enables. And then if you want to bring it on-chain, you want to really make it work with financial instruments, then you can also choose between different ways of doing that. So there are different kind of token standards that you could use in order to tokenize the same underlying data object. So that enables a multitude of different use cases there as well. So the protocol becomes more flexible and usable for different use cases. Right. So that's two of the main changes. And then the third one is that we really needed to think more careful about the identity layer. So what is a user that interacts with the same identity on different platforms? What is an organization that does the same? And this actually requires a little bit of working with the current technology where we really need to push it further. And this is not something that is finally decided, but there is kind of this analogy that we have with social media protocols. So when you see a social media protocol and you can look at the big platforms that also just log in users, but you have the alternatives where you have decentralized social media protocols that actually solve some of the problems that we have. So it's and mainly actually the two from the identity part and the data layer. So can we build something where you have an identity that you use across the platforms, and the Hypercerts protocol can provide that in an extremely easy way to the platforms that build on top of it? And can we use kind of the same data layer? So if you, in the social media world, post something, or you post something about your work that you think is impactful, or you reply to a work that has been done by somebody else, and you evaluate that and say, hey, this is great work, there's a similar interaction and a very simple interaction. And can we kind of use that data layer then and use the existing decentralized protocols to make our lives easier and build together with other ecosystems to bring this into the reality, so that it's really easy to use. And then we can add kind of the tokenization layer to really tap into the functionalities that blockchains give us, but only there where it's really needed. So that's, I think, also a little bit of a different view on the decentralized technology that we need.
Right.
We need it in order to prevent single actors from capturing the system. And decentralized technologies doesn't necessarily directly say blockchain.
Exactly.
There's a lot of exciting technology out there that we can use. And then we use blockchains where it's needed.
Yeah. I mean, that it's been kind of like an unexpected and now turning into a pleasant surprise from my vantage point that this decoupling, where some of the functions actually don't need blockchains, but they do need decentralized protocols, right? And so I think what I'm learning is that blockchains at this stage in development, when it comes to tokenization, when it comes to moving financial, resources around, they're really good. But when we're talking about things at this identity and more abstract data layer, in some cases, other protocols are potentially better for what we need, and in some instances, some of what we want to do, blockchains aren't currently ready. And I think I've kind of come up in this space as a Ethereum enthusiast, and I think my reflection for the Ethereum community is that it is still hard to do a lot of these identity functions with the current fragmented layer 2 landscape that we see. And my reflection for crypto writ large is the tribalism is hurting us. because there are a lot of different standards and there are a lot of different community, impassioned opinions about which chain are you deploying on, and that makes it hard when, from Earth's perspective, we're trying to say, "Hey, land steward, log in with an email," and be able to receive funds in any variety of payment methods, including credit card, right? Like the land stewards that we're in relationship with are not clamoring to learn how to bridge across layer twos or download wallets or self-custody private keys or so. Yeah, it's been an exercise of moving continually up the different layers of the stack and trying to marry the needs and desires and UX for the land stewards and these very important, deep technology protocols that they're actually less important now. It's just that we're holding this vision of a future where they'll become critically important because we need and want these platform network impact economies to exist on, back to our original point, fundamentally different architecture, rewriting logics.
Yeah, and to be fair, like the Ethereum community has come a long way already with like also enabling embedded wallets and those things, and like we are aware of like where it moves to, and we also see that there's still like a couple of steps to go. Specifically for us, the challenge was to at the same time provide this world-class user experience and the interoperability between different platforms such that the data schemas and everything can be reused, and we don't need to tell a specific platform how they need to like design their platform now.
Right.
So that we don't lock them into like a specific embedded wallet provider or something like that. So that's kind of the challenge that we had. Why this difference between, okay, what are other decentralized protocols that we can use that complement the Ethereum ecosystem very well? That's where we're exploring it, and we are getting very far. We are like, this is potentially also just like a call out to like everybody who is like excited about the space to like, if you want to build with the Hypercerts protocol, currently we are kind of redesigning this. So we love to hear all the requirements from platforms and builders who are thinking about funding platforms and mechanisms such that we can integrate that. And then in the next couple of weeks, we are releasing kind of like our infrastructure, our architecture, how we want to do this. And then we want to hear all the feedback such that it really works for the network. And we have like a good circle of friends and projects that we are working with. So this is kind of like just like a widening of that circle. And there are amazing players that have been working on this for years. Some of the projects were just like too early for like the mindsets and the markets that are evolving now. And how can we really design this with the best user experience and the best developer experience to make this work for the whole space? And this is where my main excitement right now comes, not just like from our ideas, because the ideas have been there for a while now, but it actually comes from the people who are involved in these different projects. And this is the exciting thing, because like ultimately I think it's all about operational excellence. Can we execute on the crazy ideas and visions that we have, and like can we bring it to the user and work with the user to really deliver value to them? And user here meaning then the land projects, but also the funders, really understanding what the funders need from the system and deliver on that. And if we can do that, we will draw more and more projects and platforms and developers into this. And that is the exciting thing, that I think we are really onto something with the people that we are working with currently.
Yeah. So since we were sitting in the seat a year ago, there's more people involved. It's an incredibly talented group. It's more practically connected to implementations and it's iterating now. Like the requirements are getting really specific and really clear on what are the roadblocks of different things around authentication, identity, around roles and permissions of storing and custodying assets, around impact claims and attestations on the different impact certificates, around fields in the impact certificates that need to be supported, around data storage and decentralizing that. I guess it's just to paint a picture that's kind of the progress that's being made. And, as kind of fellow steward, entrepreneur, builders, the most important thing is to get people smarter than us around the table. And I think that part's going well. And I would say from Earth's vantage point, our particular contribution and style in this ecosystem is not the throw spaghetti against the wall prototyper. We're never going to be the one that moves super fast to break things. What we're trying to do is really be a contributor of solid foundations, meaningful capital, high quality code, and really high integrity compliance with the regulators, with the different actors in the ecosystem. And we won't be able to do all the different functions and all the different funding allocation mechanisms and But what we want is that we're contributing high quality projects and both the organizations as well as the projects that they implement into this interoperable ecosystem. And we're built atop a charitable foundation incentive model. So we are, maintaining that as kind of our base layer. And so if, we succeed, great. If we don't succeed, then we will compost elegantly back into the soil. But we hope that we'll have contributed, meaningful work through funding getting to the land projects, right? Like that's our kind of, main MO. And so we'll run these funding rounds, move funds into the projects, and hopefully be exporting a lot of interoperable shared data, obviously with the land projects and funders in control of which data they decide to share when, with a lot of integrity around privacy consents, security and so forth.
Yes, and this is like a function that builds trust beyond kind of the tech space where we kind of like build this in. And that is then in that way that like a bridge outside to like philanthropic funders, and then also a bridge to other stakeholders that are actually like also kind of doing like they're on the same mission, but like currently the kind of the boundaries of what we might call refi is kind of too small. Like because the mission that we are on is the mission that we share with a lot of people. I mean, we are here at Climate Week. We share the mission with so many people, but we don't identify all with like kind of this is how we do it together. And I think setting this up in the way that MyEarth is doing it contributes to bridging out to these other players. And then our common approach also enables the ecosystem. If there is kind of, you mentioned vibe coding earlier, if there's somebody who like vibe codes something really fast and like shows a new functionality, that is enabled in the ecosystem as well. And it is not only like a vibe coded something, it is actually vibe coded on a foundation that we have. And I think this combination where different actors in the ecosystem take on different parts of the puzzle, because like, as you refer to Lego blocks, like all these Lego blocks, and like some are more foundational, some are more experimental, some are like just built really fast and let's see if it fits somewhere. But like then there are also those where you know that they are there and they will stay there. And you can rely on them because we cannot, not everything can be fast and iterative and you don't know if they exist next month. You also need those where you know that is the reliable anchor in the ecosystem. And how can we foster this ecosystem as a whole?
Right. And another metaphor would be an ecosystem, a rainforest. Life itself, nature itself points to all these different roles and functions and how plurality and diversity comes together. And everyone has their different ecological niche. I want to, kind of end on that arc around refi space and here at Climate Week, because, I think one thing that I'm growing more and more passionate and convinced around is this frame of regenerative finance being kind of a legible category of new mimetic space in which we're trying to bring funding for nature and regeneration, right? For our planet, to redesign economic incentives to be in harmony with planetary health and kind of a thriving living system. And that there are so many different bodies of work that don't currently call themselves regenerative finance or refi, but that I would consider refi and regenerative finance to be absolutely compatible with, and that this circle can continue to be widened as nomenclature, because ecological economics, a lot of work that came out of post-growth and degrowth, a lot of things that, John Fullerton has started to really widen what the Capital Institute is doing in terms of defining regenerative economics. So I think that's, very critical. I think that a lot of the local currency and complementary currencies, and that what's happening there, even within the Web3 space, you have things like Ethereum localism that I think is really consistent and compatible here. I think the bioregional movement you discussed and what Samantha and Tyler are doing with BioFi project. So it doesn't really matter what we call it. These words will come and go. These terms are just kind of meant to build coherence and Schelling points and so forth. But I do think that there is a legible number of apps and builders that are around the table now and having these conversations. We mentioned Gainforest. We mentioned Sylvie. We mentioned Refi DAO with Monty. We mentioned Samantha and Tyler, BioFi Project. We mentioned Restore, with Tom Crowther and Tom Elliott and team. I think that there's a number of projects where it really makes sense if we can find coherence and weave together. And that's certainly Maher's hope and aspiration, is that we can find interoperable coherence so that the heroes of our collective story, the folks on the ground doing the regenerative work, can actually have their experience be something that's respectful, uplifts them, makes applying for funding easier, makes reporting impact easier, makes moving across these systems easier, and that funders can also move into these systems with solid, trustworthy, transparent, their needs being met, so that we can help unlock this huge challenge.
Yeah, and there's also, I think the important part why it's so important to bring all these together is that we need to understand how regenerative finance is not just financialization of nature and all of that. It's quite the opposite. It's really finding out what works beyond the current system. What are the paradigms that we want to embed in our systems? And there's also the Regen Network and Regen Foundation who have done a lot of thinking around this for years already, and building with them forward in order to build this ecosystem, and build it in a way that that really is something new. That's what we need, and this is what only we together can deliver on.
Yeah. I love you keep kind of bringing it up in our meetings and discussions of if we're not contributing to something that's a new paradigm or a changing paradigms, we're doing the wrong thing, or at least we're not as all excited about what we're doing if we're just iterating on business as usual. And I think that is another principle that unites us. Closing thoughts, comments, anything else you want to share?
I'm just excited with the people here at Climate Week, also at the other conferences from Funding the Commons and Sustainable Blockchain Summit and the other communities. If the people that are involved, that are now in the room, are exciting to work with. And I'm excited that we have the people to deliver and have an amazing shot at this. And the invitation to anybody who maybe sees this right now and is like, this sounds great. Like, how can I get involved? Like, get in contact with us. And there are things to build on. There are things to contribute. And this moment in time is something that I think can be extremely crucial for our common project. And I'm excited for this, and I'm excited to work with you, the More Earth team, and all the other projects. It feels really right to be where I am right now, and that just like that feeling, because like the thinking always has been there, but like the feeling that this is exactly right has not been as strong as this in this moment. And so this just feels amazing.
Great. Yeah. It's still early, but I really feel the same. And I haven't had a chance to fully digest Climate Week. This is the last day. But I feel like we've made steps forward in the rights of nature movement, seen more happening there that has given me a bit of inspiration. Seen more happening in the bioregional space, bioregional movement. Excited about that. Excited that we're pairing the word nature with climate more. It's not just about carbon, that there's a lot more recognition of biodiversity, habitat protection. Excited to see oceans more on the agenda. Obviously can, go into a rabbit hole and dark doom and gloom about all the things that aren't, working well for the funding of environmental projects and in the climate space and some of the politics and everything. But of all of it, it's maybe just a personality typing as well, but I'm most excited about what's happening here because I just feel like it's a bold, new 0 to 1 set of solutions that I don't think people fully appreciate the profundity of what could come out of it. It's a risk, we could put a lot of effort into something and it may not, materialize and manifest. But those preconditions of success around finding great people, building in public with the ecosystem, building coherence with a lot of amazing actors and players who have come before and are starting now and so forth. The moment does seem to be ripe. So Ma Earth is as committed as ever. There's Telegram groups, there's GitHub repositories, there's, dev calls, there's different things happening in Argentina with DevConnect. A lot of discussions that'll be happening there. There's going to be things happening in Berlin. So for those listening, there's different ways to engage. I think the main call to action is hypercerts.org and reaching out. We'll put some additional links in the show notes for reaching out to you more directly.
Amazing.
Great. So as you heard, hypercerts.org for more information, as well as maearth.com for other conversations we've been having here at Climate Week and our body of work. And as always, we're open to your comments, feedback, suggestions, and participation. Thanks for being on the journey with us, and I'll see you next time.